If you've never done coaching before, you might be wondering what actually happens in a coaching session and what I'm looking for, particularly as a coach. So my coaching sits somewhere between training down one end and what I would call therapy for designers down the other. I'm not a therapist, so I'm respectful of that boundary. But the emotional states and what's going on for you, particularly around relating and relationships, is stuff that we really do work on, along with the tactical stuff. So before the session, I'll get you to create a thing called a territory map. It's a bunch of sticky notes on Mural. And I look there for your loves, hates, hopes and fears, your energizers and de-energizers and things like that. For you, it's a self-reflection activity. And for me, it's a sort of deep dive discovery activity. So I take a designly process to it. I'll also take you through your career pathway from whenever it was that you started, usually some teenage years. And in that, one of the things I ask you about is your childhood. So your parents or your primary caregivers are the first people you experience who are in charge around here. So they're your first experience of leadership. And a lot of the values and the way you learn to relate get set up in that period. That often extrapolates into the workplace and how you interact with people. I find it a really, really important question. Obviously, your boss isn't your parents, but often the emotional wiring of you treats them that way. So I'm not trying to be your therapist and resolve that. And sometimes I might suggest if you're not really doing it, go to therapy. It's a useful thing. I've done it for many, many years, and I think it should be mandatory. But I've got an example actually that really illustrates this well, and it's not uncommon. So with permission, I'm sharing a coachee story. She was in a small agency, and she was a sort of right-hand woman to her CEO and had a really good relationship with her. That CEO then left and went off to do other things. And she was tasked by the board of the company to find a new CEO. That CEO got hired, and then she ended up with this relationship with her that had a lot of friction. And sometimes she felt really micromanaged by her. Sometimes she felt like the CEO stole her thunder and sort of stepped in when she was presenting stuff. And I noticed over several sessions that her emotional response to this was greater than maybe the situation warranted. Like it really, really was bothering her. So one of the things that I'm looking at in coaching, and this is why doing it over video is so important, but you can do it over audio too. And it's the difference between, say, using AI for a coach, is I'm really looking to see, she's kind of flushed red, the glassy eyes, just the level of emotional response. And we talked about it several times. And then I asked when she can remember first feeling those kinds of emotions, what it sends her back to. And she burst into tears and she went, "Oh, my stepmother." The sort of short story is her mother left her father, they separated, and her father's then second wife, her stepmother, came in when she was a teenager. Now they have a good relationship, but at that point as a teenager, you can imagine stepmother saying, "Where are you going? What are you doing? Why are you dressed like that?" The micromanaging. It's the classic structure. And so this was mirrored in her work relationship. It didn't fully resolve it, but being able to name it was a really important thing. She would come in sometimes into the session and say, "Oh, you had a stepmother moment again." And that made her able to see that dynamic and that complex from the outside and then be able to process it and work with it very, very differently rather than just getting kind of really wound up about it. Common things that happen, I hear someone's voice change differently, or I hear someone say, "Yeah, so anyway, that doesn't really bother me." And then we talk about it for another 15 minutes. And then I know it does bother you. So my job in the coaching is, we talk about the tactical stuff. We talk about all of those things about organizations and all of those stuff. But often is to create this safe space for you to be more vulnerable, to open up, and to talk about how you're actually feeling about the relationships and dynamics at work and the conflicts and all of that stuff. And then to be sometimes a little bit sort of provocative or annoying in that safe space and ask you questions and pick away at a thing. And that's certainly something that is more pushy than a therapist would do. And it's a little bit more direct than often a life coach would do, or a career coach who might just ask you a bunch of open questions. So, it's a very fine line, a fine balance, but over many years, I've found most of the time that works very well. I don't think I've ever had a real disaster. And I'm very conscious of seeing whether the person is ready to go there or not. And what I really find is that the body rarely lies, right? Our minds, and particularly with work, because we have this idea of the sort of being professional and separating off our emotions, our minds constantly sort of rationalize away from what we actually need to face. And that's part of my job, is to create the space where we can face that, we can talk about it, and naming things is a really, really important part of that. So, the relating work is a lot of the work. It unlocks a lot more of the tactical stuff, like, gaining stakeholder buy-in and legitimacy for in initiatives, being visible, speaking up in conversations, presenting well, charisma, confidence, all those abstract things that we talk about, but what do they actually look like? And often it's around getting a clarity around what your center of your ambition is and what you want to do, maybe refinding your mojo. I have a few I've lost my mojo coaches, and be clear about what your own personal value proposition is. And in that in turn helps you decide what you say yes and no to, and not just saying yes to everything. And all of those things come together. But actually finding that clarity within yourself and understanding how you relate, you'll be surprised what a difference that makes. So if you're interested in my coaching practice, put the links in the notes below. I'd love to hear if you want to share any of your experiences. I do this activity sometimes in groups, and a lot of people find it super interesting what comes up and how it does relate to their work.